Oh, Amara, you wore that.
You should have hired someone. Really got embarrassing to watch.
She actually came here alone.
I'll be representing myself, Your Honor.
Yourself? Against all of them?
They never asked who funds all of this. What is this? Who let him in?
The suit was 15 years old. Anyone in that courtroom could see it. The cuffs gone soft at the edges. The gray faded to the color of old rain. Amara Okafor smoothed one frayed sleeve with her thumb. A small motion, almost private, the way a person steadies their own hand. Across the aisle, her mother-in-law leaned toward the lawyer and said something behind her fingers. The lawyer smiled. Julian smiled. The whole polished row of them smiled at the woman in the old suit who had come to fight them alone. They had spent a fortune on the finest legal team in the state. Not one of them thought to wonder who signed the checks that firm cashed. The courthouse smelled of floor wax and cold coffee, and the radiator under the window ticked like it was counting something down. Amara arrived early. She always arrived early. She took the seat at the plaintiff's table that had no lawyer beside it, set down a single manila folder, and folded her hands on top of it. Her suit was pressed. Her shoes were clean, though the leather had worn pale at the toes. She had dressed the way she dressed for everything, quietly, without asking to be noticed. The Okafors arrived like weather. Beatrice Okafor came first, silver hair set hard, a camel coat over her shoulders that had never seen a bus stop or a discount rack. Behind her walked Julian, Amara's husband of 9 years, soon to be nothing to her at all, in a suit that fit the way money fits. And flanking them, 3 lawyers from Harmon and Vale, the kind of firm whose name alone made judges sit straighter. Beatrice's eyes found Amara, traveled down the gray sleeves, the pale shoes, the single folder, and her mouth curved. "Oh, Amara," she said, loud enough for the gallery, "you wore that." A small laugh moved down the Okafor row. Julian looked at his shoes and let it happen. The lead attorney, a tall man named Preston Vale, set his briefcase on the table with a click like a lock closing. "Mrs. Okafor," he said to Beatrice, "not to Amara. Never to Amara. This won't take long." Amara said nothing. She turned her folder a 1/4 inch until it lined up square with the table's edge. Her face did not move, but under the table, out of sight, she pressed her thumb once more against the frayed cuff, the way you touch a thing that has been with you through worse than this. She had worn this suit to her first day at a job that paid in coins. She had worn it through nights she told no one about. She had worn it because it was hers, and because she had decided, a long time ago, that she would not let anyone dress her in fear. "Priciest legal team in the state," Julian said to no one, loosening his tie. "You should have hired someone, Amara. Really, this is embarrassing to watch." The bailiff called the room to order. Amara stood when she was asked to stand, sat when she was asked to sit, and when the judge glanced at the empty chair beside her and asked counsel for the plaintiff, she answered in a voice so level it made the clerk look up. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor." Beatrice laughed again, a bright, disbelieving sound, and covered it with her hand. The radiator ticked, the fluorescent lights hummed, and a woman in a 15-year-old suit sat straight-backed and alone, while a row of expensive people decided, out loud and without shame, that they had already won. To understand the laughing, you have to go back. 9 years earlier, Amara had married Julian in a small ceremony with folding chairs and a borrowed arch of white flowers. She had loved him the way you love someone before you've learned what they are underneath. And she had walked into the Okafor family carrying nothing they could see, no famous name, no trust fund, no coat that cost more than a month's rent. That was the problem. They could only see what they could price. She remembered one dinner in particular. It sat in her like a stone. The Okafors gathered every year for Beatrice's birthday, in the long dining room with the chandelier that threw broken light across the ceiling. Amara had spent 3 days on a dish her own grandmother used to make, jollof with the smoke cooked in low, the way it took patience and not money to get right. She carried it in still warm, proud, wanting only to belong. Beatrice looked at the pot the way you look at something tracked in on a shoe. "We have caterers, dear," she said, "but how thoughtful." The dish went to the kitchen. It did not come back to the table. And later, when the family posed for the photograph they framed every year and hung along the stairwell, Beatrice arranged them with one hand, Julian here, the cousins there, and simply did not call Amara's name. The photographer counted heads. Amara stepped back against the wall, out of frame, and no one told her to step in. She heard what Beatrice said to the aunt beside her. Not cruel, exactly. Worse than cruel. Casual. "She's nothing. Julian will figure it out eventually." As if a person could be counted down to nothing. What none of them knew, because Amara had chosen it that way, was what she did with the long hours no one asked about. She had a grandmother's kitchen table, and a lamp that buzzed, and stacks of paperwork she spread out there most nights after the house went dark. She was building something. She had been building it, quietly, for years. She did not talk about it. For the same reason she did everything the way she did. She preferred to know the answer before the room started asking the question. She wanted to be loved as a person, not as a balance, not as an asset. She had spent her childhood being valued for what she could do for other people, and she had promised herself that when she found a family, she would find out whether they wanted her, the woman, not the number. Now she knew the answer. She had known it for years. She had simply been waiting, with a patience that had nothing left of hope in it, for the family to say it plainly enough that she could stop pretending she hadn't heard. They had said it plainly, in a courtroom, in front of a judge. "You wore that." Amara sat with her hands folded on a manila folder and let the memory pass through her like cold water and did not so much as blink. The trial was about the house, not the marriage. That was already ending, quietly, in a separate set of papers. This was about the property on Kessler Hill, the one Amara had bought before she ever met Julian, the one his family had decided, somewhere in the machinery of their certainty, was theirs to take. There were claims about commingled funds, improvements paid for by the family trust, a tangle of half-truths that Harmon and Vale had spun into 100 pages of confident paper. Preston Vale worked the room like a man who had never lost. He walked without hurry, he said "Your Honor," the way other men said "of course." When he laid out the Okafor case, he did it with the smooth weight of a firm that billed $900 an hour and expected the world to arrange itself accordingly. The plaintiff, Vale said, gesturing loosely toward Amara without looking at her, would have this court believe she managed such a purchase on her own. The financial reality, Your Honor, tells a different story. Behind him, Beatrice sat with her chin lifted, wearing certainty like the camel coat. Julian checked his phone under the table. This was, to them, already a formality. You did not spend this kind of money to lose. Money was the thing that decided. It had always been the thing that decided. Amara watched Vale work and felt something she couldn't quite name. Not quite pity, but close to it. He was very good. He believed in what he was selling. When it was her turn, she stood. "Your Honor," she said, "I have documentation of the original purchase. The deed, the financing. All of it under my name, dated before my marriage." Vale rose smoothly. "Objection to relevance. The question before the court is one of subsequent contribution." Overruled. Let her speak. Amara opened the manila folder. She slid a single sheet across to the clerk, then another. She spoke plainly, without theater, laying down facts the way you lay down cards you've held a long time. There was no tremor in her voice. There was no heat. There was only a woman who knew exactly what she was and had stopped needing anyone else to agree. Beatrice leaned to Julian and whispered, and Julian smiled, and the smile said, "Look at her, in that suit, thinking paper will save her." They had the priciest legal team in the state. They had a certainty built over decades, the certainty of people who had never once had to wonder where the next thing came from. The morning wore on. The radiator ticked under the window. And at 11:40, the courtroom's back door opened, and a man in a plain dark suit stepped in, a slim leather folder tucked under his arm. If you've ever been underestimated, looked up and down, and quietly counted out of the room, then you already know how Amara feels sitting at that table. Take a second to subscribe and leave the word dignity in the comments so we know you're here. It helps more people find these stories. Now, let's see who just walked through that door. The man was not a lawyer. That was the first thing that made Vale pause. He wore no firm's uniform, carried no wheeled cart of exhibits. He was middle-aged, unhurried, with the kind of neutral politeness that belongs to people who deliver things that matter. He waited at the rail until the judge acknowledged him, and then he spoke a sentence that made Preston Vale's pen stop moving. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption. I'm here to deliver time-sensitive notice to a party present in this courtroom, on behalf of Meridian Bank." Beatrice's head turned. Meridian was the family's bank. Meridian held the operating loan on the Okafor business, the import company that had been in the family for 30 years, the company that was, Amara happened to know, the entire foundation on which Beatrice had built her certainty. Meridian was where the money lived that paid for camel coats and chandeliers, and the priciest legal team in the state. "What notice?" Beatrice said, before her own lawyer could stop her. The judge motioned. The man crossed the well of the court and set the leather folder on the defense table, in front of Beatrice, in front of Julian, in front of Preston Vale. He opened it. Inside was a single page on heavy stock, the kind of paper that has weight in the hand, watermarked and cold and official. "Notice of review," the man said quietly. "The bank has flagged the Okafor trading operating line for a compliance and standing review. Standard procedure when questions arise about the character of the account holders. You'll want your counsel to read it." The paper made a small sound as it settled, a dry, expensive whisper against the table. Beatrice's face did something complicated. First disbelief, then a flash of the old certainty. This is a mistake. This will be handled. Someone will be fired. And then, watching her lawyer's expression, the first thin crack of fear. Because Preston Vale was reading the page. And Preston Vale had gone still. He read it once. He read it again, slower, and his hand, the hand that had gestured so smoothly all morning, settled flat on the table and did not move. His eyes went to a line near the bottom, the line that named the reviewing authority, the line that listed, as such documents must, the controlling interest that had ordered the review. He read the name on that line. Then, very slowly, Preston Vale turned his head, not toward Beatrice, not toward Julian, and looked across the aisle at the woman in the 15-year-old suit. "Mr. Vale," the judge said, "is there a problem?" Vale opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Amara had not moved. She sat with her hands folded on her empty folder, and she met the lawyer's eyes, and for the first time all morning, something crossed her face. Not triumph, something quieter and much older. The look of a person watching a truth she has carried alone for years finally step into the light where everyone can see it. "I don't understand," Beatrice said, her voice climbing. "Preston, what does it say?" Preston Vale set the paper down as if it had grown warm in his hands. "The reviewing authority," he said, and his voice had lost every ounce of its morning polish, "is the office of the controlling shareholder, of Meridian Bank." "Yes, fine," Beatrice snapped. "And who is that? Get them on the phone. Do you have any idea who we are?" Vale did not answer her. He was looking at Amara, so Beatrice, following his eyes, looked too, and Julian, who had gone very pale, who had put his phone face down on the table without meaning to, looked as well. "The controlling shareholder of Meridian Bank," Vale said slowly, each word laid down like a stone he wished he could take back, "is listed here as A. Okafor." The room did not gasp. It went quiet in a different way, the way a room goes quiet when the air pressure drops before a storm, when everyone in it understands something at the same moment, and no single voice is willing to be the first to say it. The clerk stopped typing. The bailiff, by the door, shifted his weight and stood a little straighter. "That's impossible," Beatrice said, but the certainty had drained out of her voice and left only the shape of the words. "That's... Amara doesn't... She could not finish it. Not here. Not with the judge watching." Amara stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not smile. She reached into the manila folder that everyone had assumed held only her deed, and she withdrew one more sheet of the same heavy, watermarked stock, and she walked it, unhurried, in her pale, worn shoes, across the well of the courtroom, and she placed it on the defense table beside the first. "For 9 years," she said quietly, "you paid your bills through Meridian, your mortgage, your business line, your credit." She looked at Beatrice, and there was no cruelty in it, which somehow made it land harder. "The retainer you paid Harmon and Vale cleared through a Meridian account 4 days ago. I approved the transfer myself. I didn't have to. I let it clear because I wanted to see how far you would go." Julian made a small sound. His mouth moved. "Amara, you never. Why didn't you tell me?" And there it was, the whole marriage, in 3 words. Only the arithmetic, spinning up behind his eyes. recalculating a woman he had called an embarrassment 90 minutes ago. "I wanted to know," Amara said, and for one breath her composure thinned enough to show what was under it. Not anger, but a grief so old it had gone smooth. "Whether any of you wanted me, just me, in this suit, with nothing you could count." She let that sit. "Now I know." Beatrice had not spoken. Beatrice, who had built the family import company out of nothing 40 years ago, who had crossed an ocean with 2 suitcases and a child, and turned fear into a business and a name, sat with her jeweled hands flat on the defense table, and understood, at last, that everything she had mistaken for permanence had always rested on a floor that belonged to the woman she had dismissed as nothing. She had spent her whole life terrified of ending up with nothing, and she had taught her son to measure people the same frightened way, because to Beatrice, a person without a coat and a chandelier was a person one bad year from the 2 suitcases she still saw in her dreams. None of that was an excuse, but sitting there, stripped of the things she had been running on, she looked less like a villain than like an old woman who had finally run out of road. "Your Honor," Preston Vale said, and cleared his throat, and could not quite make his voice work. The defense would request a brief recess." The judge looked at the 2 sheets of heavy paper, looked at the woman standing in the middle of his courtroom in a 15-year-old suit. "I imagine you would," he said. Beatrice's shoulders drew up, Julian's jaw set. Down the defense row, the lawyers gathered themselves, bracing for the fury they felt they had coming. People who use money as a weapon expect, always, to be struck with it in return. They understood revenge. They had built their whole strategy on the assumption that everyone, underneath, was as afraid as they were. Amara only stood there, still, and let them wait for a blow that wasn't coming. She walked back to her table. She reached into the folder one last time and drew out a 3rd document, thicker than the others, bound at the corner, the words across the top printed plain and black. "Notice of review, recall of credit facility, Okafor Trading." She did not read it aloud. She did not explain it. She simply set it down in the center of the defense table, squared it gently with 2 fingers the way she had squared her own folder that morning, and stepped back. The recall decision, the one that could pull the loan that held the whole family enterprise upright, signed and dated and sitting there, not executed, only set down, a thing she could do, a thing she was choosing, in this moment, to let them look at. The sound in the courtroom afterward was not silence. It was the radiator, ticking under the window. It was Beatrice Okafor's breath going ragged and catching. It was the small, dry rustle of Preston Vale, drawing the document toward himself with one finger, as if it might burn. It was Julian's chair creaking as the weight of 9 years and 1 morning settled onto him all at once. Amara picked up her empty folder. She buttoned the jacket of her 15-year-old suit, the frayed cuffs and all, and she looked at the family that had counted her as nothing. "I'm not going to recall it," she said. Heads came up. "Not because you deserve better." She said it evenly, a fact and not a blow. "Because there are 40 people at Okafor Trading who had nothing to do with this room. They'll keep their jobs. The loan stands." She paused at the rail. "The house is mine. It always was. My lawyers will confirm the deed by end of day. The real ones, the ones you didn't see me hire, because I've learned to keep the things that matter quiet." She looked at Julian one last time. There was nothing left in it. No love, no fury, just the clean, flat calm of a door closing on a room you've already walked out of. "You asked why I didn't tell you," she said. "That was the answer, Julian. If I'd told you, you'd have looked at me like this in year 1. I just wanted a few years of being a person first." Then Amara Okafor turned and walked out of the courtroom, past the gallery, past the tall doors, into the ordinary noise of the corridor, unhurried, in her worn grey suit, her head level and her hands empty. Behind her, the radiator ticked on in the quiet, and no one in that room said a word. Amara didn't win by shouting. She won by knowing exactly who she was long before the room did, and by refusing, even at the end, to become cruel just because she finally could. If this story moved you, do something small for us. Subscribe, and tell us in the comments about a time you were underestimated, and what it felt like the day the room finally went quiet. We read them. We build the next stories from your voices. There are more people here who know what it's like to be counted as nothing, and more stories about the quiet moment the counting stops.